In terms of the ability to get sponsored content on those different platforms, have you seen that shift over time? And I know, like, even I look at Captivate. Captivate was a company that does like kind of, it's almost like an influencer marketplace. I don't know if you're familiar with it or have ever worked
I
with brands
have,
on
yeah.
there. Okay. So Captivate, as and this is an aside disclaimer, we did a small angel investment in Captivate early through a syndicate. So we weren't like really involved with it. So that's why I'm somewhat familiar with it and track along with it. But I've seen them start to shift a little bit in terms of their positioning and say TikTok. Like before it was really Instagram. Within the last couple of years, it's been TikTok. Have you seen that reflected in terms of any brands or sponsors who reach out to you and say, hey, it used to be 3 years ago, everybody would want to work with you on Instagram. Have you seen a shift to TikTok or like more people on YouTube? What does that look like in terms of an interest from sponsors?
So I think that like the large companies that have the big social media budget, the big social spend, are so slow moving. Like I used to work at L'Oreal, and I used to manage the social budgets there for Garnier, Maybelline, and Essie. So I have like a very unique insider perspective. I also worked at a PR agency doing corporate finance there. So I've seen both sides of how everything works. And a lot of times, like, it takes large companies, like, they were still shifting from, like, TV spend to digital spend, like, when I was there.
Totally.
It's
billboards
really
to...
like, some companies are still, like, just moving to Instagram, and, like, because everybody wants the metrics on, like, what the return, like, that's the number one question. Like, well, how many sales is this generating? And sometimes you can't always tie it that neatly or create that, like, direct of a number. So it takes companies a long time to move. And I think that, like, I've actually seen more sponsored posts on Instagram for me than I ever have this year. And I think the social spend is increasing because companies know that so many people are spending so much time on their phones and on like watching TV and things and YouTube videos and stuff on their. So I think that they know that's where consumers' eyes are. So spend is going up in that category as a whole. I definitely have gotten more TikTok sponsorships, but like it's been slow moving. And I think it will take a lot more time for companies to get comfortable with that. They're definitely like pivoting quickly, but that still just takes like so long. Like it's going to be a long road.
In terms of corporate. Movement.
And especially like they might be buying ads on the platform, which is like great. And TikTok has done a really good job incorporating that in. But in terms of like paying influencers to create ads and things like that, I think it's still coming. It's happening right now, but there's more to come.
Yeah, which would make sense now, kind of at the peak of the shift towards Instagram, maybe 2, 3, 4 years from now, that will change to a platform that currently has a lot of traction.
Doesn't even exist. It could be like a new platform.
for sure. What do you feel like you learned when you had the role of, what was the first role you had talked about? It was like you were managing that budget for
Yes. So
spend.
I worked in like corporate finance or FP&A at L'Oreal, and I was, I just managed the social budgets for those brands.
What do you feel like you learned from that experience and then now apply with your day-to-day of like being an influencer who would be getting paid from brands?
I love that question because I think a lot of influencers, and it's not like this is the wrong thing to do, but a lot of people think that you should like reach out to brands and, contact people directly and not sit around waiting for brands to come to you, which it never hurts to be proactive. Like that's a great thing to do in life. But a lot of times the way these budgets are formulated, like you create buckets and you make them like before the year even starts of like where you're going to allocate your funds, what big campaigns you have, when that spend is going to happen. It's laid out, it's tied to your revenue because your P&L like is like a work of art. It has to flow just right to hit sales numbers, especially if it's a publicly owned company. So you can reach out to a brand and be like, I'd love to work with you. But realistically, they have like, thousands of dollars set aside in September for this specific activation. And they'll reach out to you when they're ready to work on that campaign. Like you can make them aware of you, but like they don't just have a slush fund of money sitting around to like put aside to random things like that. That's just not how those big companies work. And that's where the big dollars are. So in my experience, like I initially was like, oh, I should be reaching out more. But realistically, like when companies have money to spend, like, and their agencies that they work with, they'll find you. So like it's hard to get your foot in the door at first, but I think once you start doing some campaigns, like brands will become more aware of you. And as you grow, like they have systems where they track influencers on their different platforms, their followers, like the analytics are crazy. And a lot of large companies or agencies have their own systems that they do that in. You just need to like have a big enough presence to hopefully get into one of those systems. And then you can come up when they're searching for people that are the right fit for different campaigns and different clients.
So almost advice. Well, maybe the question is, would your advice be, hey, you can reach out. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to make a connection. It's not a bad thing to pitch. But if you're going to spend 50% of your time doing that, it's probably better to spend 50% of your time figuring out how to build your following, how to create engaging content, because those are the things that will tip you into these databases where they say, hey, we want to find somebody who focuses on baked goods and has over 250,000 followers. Filter. They see the list. We want an engagement rate of at least 4%. Filter, you see the list, and then people reach out to you. Is that kind of what you're getting at? Absolutely.
That's exactly what I mean. And I think that if you're really creating good quality content, I like to say people notice and people will find you. So I think that's the best place to put your energy into, is just trying to create the best stuff that you can.
Yeah. And so for you, when you're working with brands and sponsors, mostly on Instagram for social, are you doing any on your blog, or is it mostly social when it comes to sponsor content?
I was going to say something about that earlier and then I forgot. I was going to say it's really great if you can't. It's super challenging to grow across platforms because they're all uniquely different, and trying to really make the best possible quality content across that many different formats is challenging. But it really helps to have a presence across different platforms, because a lot of times a brand will be like, we want an influencer that can make a YouTube video, an Instagram video, and a TikTok for this new product that we're launching. And so it's really helpful to have that array of platforms so that you can do, and I mean, it's not to say that you won't get partnerships, because a lot of times it is just one platform, but being able to offer those options and include them in your rate card and showing that you can do that is really helpful. I've found a lot of big partnerships want to have for you to share it across your platforms. And so I'm so grateful, even though it is a pain. And I think I kind of do a B job across all my platforms instead of focusing on one and doing an A+ job. I still think it's a better way to divide my energy so that I'm ready for any opportunity that comes my way.
Yeah, I think of that with Pinch of Yum. So Lindsay, my wife, kind of does the day-to-day with a great team there for Pinch of Yum, and all credit to them for building that as a platform. But they do, if a sponsor will come to us and they'll say, hey, we would be interested in working with you, we'll have, like you said, a rate card, and it'll break it out and say hey, we could do blog posts, we could do videos. If we do videos, here's what it would look like to publish it to Instagram and to Facebook and to the blog. Is that kind of what it looks like for you? A brand will reach out, you send them what it would look like to work with you, and then you kind of work together to put a package together. Are you doing that? And what have you, if so, what have you learned about that you could teach other people in terms of putting together a package that's competitive and you're getting paid well, but also something that the brand would work for the brand?
Yes. So I love having a media kit ready, which kind of includes a bunch of stuff, kind of talks about me, what my brand is about, shares about any accomplishments I've had, which could be TV appearances. If you've done a book, you could put a book in there, anything that you're really proud of. I talk about the different formats of content I create and through my platforms, my following count, and just what platforms I have a presence on. And then I also share stats about my blog and also examples of past partnerships that have done well, because they want to see what you're capable of. It's a PDF, but I embedded a link in it so you can click to the sponsored post and actually see what I've done, which is nice.
Cool.
So I think that's good, just because it kind of shows a brand what you're capable of. It gives them a quick snapshot. Realistically, they've probably already done the research if they're reaching out to you. But if they're reaching out to you just as an inquiry and they have 10 influencers they're considering and they're only going to have 3 for the campaign, it's so helpful to just have everything laid out and to look really professional. So I made one in Canva. It's not super, it's a little bit time consuming. It's not super hard to do, and you can update it then as you go. So I highly recommend having a media kit and then a rate card that shows either, like you mentioned, your individual pricing. I have a full package that's obviously a better deal if, so they're more motivated to do everything, blog post, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram stories, the whole works.
Totally.
But yeah, I will send that back. And then a lot of times though, a brand already knows like what they want. So like you can work with them and figure out what makes sense, but they know that they want like an Instagram post and a TikTok video, or they just want a TikTok video or whatever it is. So there's not like too much of that, but there's more negotiating in terms of like what I'm going to make and how I'm going to use their product or how I'm going to share it on my platforms. And, you know, then you get into actually like the iteration of the content and the content review. But usually brands are have a clear idea of exactly what they want from you when they email you is what I found.
Yep. Do you have, don't have to share what the actual rates are, but I think a lot of people are like, how do I go about figuring out what my rate is? Like, I think a lot of people come to the table and they're like, I don't know, like either on one side, like, hey, I want to work with brands and I'd kind of be willing to get paid not a lot to get started and kind of build my portfolio. Or on the other side, don't want to send people something and they'd look at it and be like, what? You think you're going to get paid that much? Never, you know, and then no reply.
Such good questions.
How do you feel comfortable with a rate that's like competitive, but also paying you well?
It is hard, especially when you're starting. Because like, number one, you doubt yourself and you're like, am I worth this? Like, am I creating things? And so I totally get that feeling. And just like when you're new to it, and if you like, luckily I had a background in it. So I was like reviewing influencer contracts, like managing those things. So I saw what people were charging and like I was familiar with it, which helped a lot. But I think kind of like the going rate is like $1 per 100 followers. So like if you were to take my following on like Instagram, say it's like 1.2 million, it'd be like $12,000 a post. And that's not to say that you like, if you have amazing engagement, maybe you charge more, or like also if you have like less, like I think if you have like 250,000 followers, you probably could charge more. I think there's like a band, and on the upper end, you probably can't charge too much more because it really is like so much money out of a budget. But if you're on the lower end, you probably can charge up a little bit. But that's just like a rule of thumb. So that's like by no means like you need to adhere by that.
The ultimate,
And also like, you know, sometimes I will get a pitch from a brand like that I really love, or like I genuinely love the product, or it's like a show that I'm like a huge fan of. So even if the budget is like lower than my like rate card, I'm like usually willing to work with it. But I mean, you do need to negotiate, because like it's not that they're buying just your time, they're buying your audience. Like you are feeding this ad to your audience, and you've spent like how many years building this page, building this audience and following. So you don't want to undervalue yourself, but at the same time, especially when you're getting started, you know, like some money is better than no money. And if you're trying to make a go of it and be full time, like it's all about what you're comfortable with and what you feel good about. So it's hard and it varies. And you want to stand firm, but at the same time, it's okay to be a little bit flexible. And some brands, if it's not some huge brand, probably don't have a huge budget. So you might want to be more flexible with that. So
it seems like some of the variables are, to your point, like how much do I like this company? How much do I like this brand? Another variable would be how much do I like doing sponsored content? I know some people who hate doing sponsored content, so they quote a ridiculously high rate. And some people will say, hey, we really like working with you, so we'll pay it. So they like don't enjoy it, but they feel justified by the price. Another would be like how closely aligned is it with the content that you produce? And for you, you talked about, hey, this would be a show. And I think some people would hear that and be like, wait, a show will sponsor you? Can you talk a little bit about how that works and how that plays into you creating recipes, but then how it could also be a show?
Yes. So when I say show, I just mean like I did a partnership with Rick and Morty, which like I love animated TV show. Like I love SpongeBob. It's a long saga, but I got reached out to by them and they were like, can you make a reel to celebrate the 5th season of Rick and Morty? And I was like, oh, heck yeah. So like I made a pickle Rick cake. Unless you've watched the show, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about.
I know like I've read, this is like how I consume content. I've read articles about Rick and Morty and like, but I've never actually seen an episode of it.
That's totally fine. So there's like a really iconic episode that's like the season, I think, won an Emmy, or I don't know if it was a show or the season, but just like a very iconic season that if you like episodes, if you like the show, you know this. So I made a cake of that and it performed really well because anybody that likes the show is like obsessed with that. Like they understood it, which I was nervous about because I was like, is this too niche? Is anyone going to get it? But people did. But there's stuff like that all the time, or like movie premieres. Like I made a overall cake for like Mamma Mia 2 like years ago. That was like one of my first bigger partnerships. And I was like, this is crazy. They sent me overalls. It was a whole thing. It was fun.
That's cool.
And so I generally like making sponsored content. I mean, I prefer doing my own stuff 100%, sure. But a lot of times with the way my platforms are, like, I really try my hardest to do something that's like fun and that I'm proud of. And so I can make a cake or something that's really cool and aligned with what the brand wants. Yeah. Like, I'm excited to make it. So I really try to stick with opportunities like that. I never do things that are off brand, like sugar, like the sugar bear hair gummies, or like slim tea. I get so many things like that just like, I would never ever do. But so I think it's also about picking the right opportunities that are aligned with your brand.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in your case, it sounds like sometimes the sponsored content can even be the best performing content. Like if it's a niche, if it's about a show, people would be excited about it. And that to me is the best type of content.
Yes.
It's a win for the brand. It's a win for you. If your followers are excited about it, like all of that stuff aligns. And I think that's where sponsored content works the best, is when you can align all of those things.